Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for being here tonight. My name is Anthony Schopp. I chair the events committee here at the National Press Club, so welcome. I'd like to just start by asking how many of you have ever been to an event at the National Press Club before? Wow, so a lot of folks. Great. Well, we're known for a lot of really great events here. Cabinet secretaries, CEOs, even presidents speak. We have a lunchtime series, and last week the head of NASA gave a speech to talk about the shuttle launch. But increasingly, our members, both our journalist members and our communicator members, are seeing that there's a major trend happening in how people get information. They're getting more information online instead of from print, radio, and broadcast. And so our journalist members are putting more of their materials online, like folks on this panel, and our communicator members are targeting online publications more. So we've launched a new series, which you are a part of tonight, called Get It Online. And we're going to be looking specifically at how people are getting their information online and how media outlets are disseminating information through online sources. Now, I mentioned journalist members and communicator members, so before I continue, I do just want to let all of you know, whether you're a journalist, and that could be a blogger, a freelance writer, an author, or a communicator, someone who works with the media in some capacity, you can become a member of the National Press Club. So I would encourage you to talk to me, Kim Bender, or Kate Michael if you have any questions about becoming a member, because there are a lot of great amenities and professional benefits to being a member. So before I continue and I introduce Kate, our moderator, who's going to introduce the panel, I do want to just say a special thanks to one very important person, and that is Kim Bender, member of the events committee at the Press Club. She is the person who organized this event. So let's give Kim a hand. So you notice we have the screen here. We will be live tweeting. If you have Twitter on your phone, we encourage you to participate. You can use the Press Club's hashtag, which is PressClubDC, or you can use the hashtag we've just launched for this series, which is Get It Online. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator. We have Kate Michael from K Street Kate. You probably have all heard of K Street Kate. It's an online lifestyle magazine. She founded it 5 years ago, and about 3.5 years ago took the plunge from it being a part-time, sort of as I might call it, a 5 to 9, to being her full-time 9 to 5 or 9 to 9, maybe, much more. But Kate has great experience to share about how to get a website going, an online publication, how to monetize that, and so I'm sure some of you will have questions about that. She's been a member of the Press Club for 4 years and contributes in a lot of ways here. So with that, Kate Michael.
Thank you. I think I have one. I think it's working. So because this is put on by the young members, as you can tell, we're not at a table. I'm not behind a podium. This is going to be a very informal discussion, and I am going to start the discussion, kind of get us rolling in a journalistic way. And then as you all have questions, we're going to leave the last half of this for your questions. So jot those down, keep them in your head. I'm going to be asking you to have those ready whenever I've exhausted all of mine. But we'll get started here. Instead of introducing each of the panelists individually, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, but not in your typical, hi, I'm Kate Michael, I'm the president of K Street Kate. I want you to tell who you are and how your site fills a niche in your community. So I'll start with you, David.
My name is David Garber, and I run the blog And Now Anacostia. I've been doing it for about 4 years now. And the way it fills a niche in the community is basically I try to make it a positive news source for a neighborhood that typically, in my experience at least, have been represented by negative press. Yeah, so that's pretty much why I started it and what the niche it fills is.
Okay. My name is Matt Rhodes, and I'm the co-founder and editor of, can you hear me? Borderstand.com. We cover the DuPont, Logan, and U Street neighborhoods. I think probably what's unique about us is that we try to provide a broad overview of what's going on in those 3 adjoining neighborhoods. We have about 12 contributors now. We actually have sort of 7 section areas on the site. So, you know, we try to be the one place to go to that provides a broad overview of those adjoining neighborhoods.
I'm Brian Farnham. I'm the editor-in-chief of Patch.com. And we have a lot of communities. We have 849 across 22 states, including the District of Columbia. So that's a lot of niches. The thing we're trying to do on all of them equally is to be the hyperlocal platform for content, commerce, and community. So that means a lot of different things, and it does not mean that we're in there to replace anything that already is there. It means that we're there to be part of that ecosystem, which is something we talk about a lot. So it's really about filling needs that we think are there and linking to the other solutions that are already there.
Okay, and my name is Elise Bernard. I created and run the blog Frozen Tropics. It covers sort of the 8th Street area and the larger area north of Capitol Hill, including Trinidad, where I live. I started about 6.5 years ago, and I did it because somewhat for 8th Street, but more so for Trinidad. There really wasn't a lot of information online if you tried to look around. What was not very positive, and it was not in depth at all. Now there is a lot of information about 8th Street, and to a lesser degree, a lot of information about Trinidad as well. So I try to, I'm obviously show people the other articles that are coming in, so I do a lot of linking, that sort of thing, but also just kind of an insider's perspective, and it's a place that people can go and just see the things that matter to them about, like, maybe a house that burned down or these trees that have fallen over, different things. It's a way that people can interact and talk about that cleanup that's going on Saturday. And I don't know, I've had a lot of people actually, not only from the neighborhood, tell me that they find it very useful, but also people have told me that it actually played a big part in their decision to move to the neighborhood when they were trying to sort of explore it and interact with other people from the area and just sort of see what kind of vibe it might be like.
And I am Aaron Morrissey. I'm the editor-in-chief at DCist. We're the Washington branch of the Gothamist network. Our goal is basically to serve as a news, arts, and culture repository of sorts for the District of Columbia, Northern Virginia, and Maryland suburbs. And I think our main goal is actually to keep up with baby panda news. But no, actually, our main goal is to act as a conduit between smaller local blogs, neighborhood blogs, and larger media outlets like the Washington Post and television outlets, and kind of synthesize that information with a local voice and a local tone, and to provide as comprehensive an outlook on the city as we possibly can.
Okay, so there seems to be a trend here. We were talking about niches, and you all mentioned local, location. So that's what we're here for. We're talking about hyperlocal, right? And there are a lot of niche publications in the city, but the reason why we've asked these panelists is because they do really focus on community. So this is not a topic that's new. You've seen it. There was a Pew Research study. It was in the Time. It was in Newsweek. I think I've seen something about it in Forbes. But the reason it's still important to talk about it today is that we wonder if online sites are going to replace the way you traditionally get your news. Now, news organizations right now are cutting staffs right and left, and a lot of the things that are going first are community news. Do you feel like you are supplanting or supplementing people's where they go for traditional news with your community news, and how are you engaging the community to share their news with you? Like, how are you using the community as a back and forth? Who wants to start with that one? Will you start with this one?
I think what we do is, I don't think we supplant anybody or anything. I think what we do is we simply are able to go into more depth because we cover some very specific areas. And so what that allows us to do is to really go in and provide in-depth coverage in an area that perhaps bigger publications and media outlets can't do. And what we have in our area, the local community papers simply don't have an online presence yet, and that left a void.
How about in Frozen Tropics? Can you tell us what it's like in your area?
I definitely would agree with that it's not meant to replace it or supplant it in any way. I do think that it's a good supplement. Like I said, it's a good way for people to interact with their neighbors as well as interact with me and to sort of react to the stories they're seeing in other media outlets, but also to react to just smaller things that the larger media is just not equipped to know about these things unless that reporter happens to live down the street and it's simply not going to be covered. It's not a big enough story.
I think that there's also something to be said about, especially for print media, there's a limitation, right, on the amount of work that the Washington Post, let's say, for example, can actually put into a newspaper. So that the Washington Post doesn't have the kind of space to cover, let's say, advisory neighborhood commission meetings. But those are very important things that affect a lot of people, especially when it comes to, D.C., for example, like let's say a voluntary agreement at a local bar, or a new grocery store that's planning on opening up, or a new condo building that has development plans. Then those things are very important, but those are the kind of things that print media oftentimes doesn't get to, and that's the way we can fill a void, while not supplanting, but also just kind of helping to fill the gap.
So I want to ask the people that have a local site, and then I want to get to you at Patch, because I think you have an interesting angle on this one.
We have local sites, too.
Yes, but you'll explain. As a smaller local site, is your end goal to work as your own news entity, or do you one day hope to be the local arm or the community arm of a larger station, paper, or broadcast? Like, what are you working toward?
Honestly, when I started my blog, I had no journalistic background, and I really just wanted other people to see a neighborhood that I had seen and appreciate it in the kind of diverse ways that I was learning to appreciate it in. And I had moved to Anacostia in 2007, and so that's when I started my blog, and I didn't want to be the only person who was getting excited about the neighborhood. I was convinced that everything was going to get built and was going to happen in 2007 when I moved there. And there have been a few disappointments since then. And I actually don't even live in the neighborhood anymore, but I have always just wanted to keep up the blog as a way to make sure there is a web presence for a neighborhood that typically also isn't that well represented online, and has kind of a constituency of people that are very interested in reading positive things about their own neighborhood.
Okay.
When you, actually, if you could define your questions a little bit, you say the arm of a larger...
You would be the local writer for the Washington Times, or the Washington Times would use your content as their local content for that neighborhood, or the Washington Post would use your content. Or in the case of AOL, which uses its Patch writers as their writers for their larger...
Well, the short answer is if someone came along and offered us, a very good sum of money for that. My spouse is sitting over here. I think probably there would be a resounding yes to a question like that. But my day job is in communications, and so I've spent a lifetime working for other people, and I like running my own thing.
All right.
I think, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think Matt brings up a really good point here in that, at a place like DCist, I'm the only full-time employee at DCist, but we have 40 contributors who are very passionate about the community. And, their goal isn't necessarily to be a part of a bigger operation. They just, kind of want to do the 5 to 9 thing, right? And they want to be able to go and review a restaurant or, go see a play and write about it and have an outlet for that. And I think that's important. An important part of the idea of getting it online is that there's people with these in areas of expertise that otherwise they wouldn't be writing about anything. Right. But with us, they can.
Let me just jump back in. One thing that happened to me was that I found that bigger media players started asking me to contribute to their print newspapers or take my content and use it on their online sites and things like that. And I think people have seen the value in kind of local reporting, where it's not somebody just on staff going into maybe a neighborhood or a street that they're not as familiar with and trying to report on it. They do see the value of people inside the communities really kind of having that personal approach.
Great, that's what I'm trying to get to. We want to know what the future of news is. All these people want to know if they should sign on with you or try to get that job with CNN. So do you want to talk about Patch a little bit in this respect and how having a larger organization like AOL over you, like how that changes what you have going on versus the other panelists?
Yeah, one thing it's done is allowed us to sort of supercharge our mission, which was to get to as many places as need us as we can. There's actually 2 local editors here, Sean Courtney and Brad Garrett. They should probably be up here instead of me because they can really talk about what is the linchpin and the whole thing behind this, which is the local presence, the local expert, doing very similar things to what these guys are doing, really. So that makes each of our patches a small operation. Each of them has that one full-time local editor, plus some community freelancers. So it is very similar. What it does for us to be part of AOL, again, it's a huge benefit to have access to those resources sort of on the back end and the support of a company that is as passionate about this as we are. I don't know if people know this, but the CEO of AOL, Tim Armstrong, Patch was his idea back before he became CEO. So I joke a lot that it's rare in your career that your sort of little division of the big company is the apple of the CEO's eye. Well, Patch is that, and that means that we really have tremendous support. The other thing that it does for us is the recent acquisition by AOL of the Huffington Post has given us this amazing opportunity to go local to global and kind of back again, to use this other huge platform that is very new and innovative and doing the same thing that we are in the sense of treating news as a conversation, as a discussion. There's a story, and then there's stories about that story sort of between the community talking about it. And that is local, right? That's exactly what local is. Something happens, and then people need to talk to each other about it. So much different scale, but when you tie those things together, we see lots of interesting opportunities to do cool things.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk to you guys about your content. How often do you update? How often do you write a story? And how are you finding the content for your stories? Are you just out and about in your community? Are people writing to you with things they would like to hear? We didn't hear from you at Frozen Tropics, so would you like to start?
Sure. Well, I have several people, I guess, that I will routinely call, and then I'm out in the community a fair amount. I know a lot of the business owners, and I know certain people who might have connections to different stories, so I will routinely call them and try to visit them. I also do write a monthly column in the Hill Rag called 8th Street Life, so that's another way that I often will engage with new business people that might be coming into the community, and from there I can kind of address the blog, and that way they're sort of, if they talk to me, it's kind of a double value or bang for their buck. So I would say that's a lot of it, and then also I definitely get email tips from different people. People will ask me questions as well, and sometimes that might lead to a story. But I would say generally that's where it comes from.
A border stand, 3 neighborhoods. How do you keep up with 3 neighborhoods, content for 3 neighborhoods?
You know, I wouldn't say we're not a breaking news site usually. Sometimes yes. I mean, what we try to do is go back and maybe provide some texture and put things in sort of a little deeper perspective. In terms of finding news, I mean, I like to joke, you know, in that area, particularly, you know, the New York Times called, you know, or joking, or somebody said, you know, Logan Circle is now the it neighborhood. If you can't find something to write about in our coverage area, you're sitting in the house with the shades pulled and no electricity.
Which might be something to write about.
Which I would guess would be something
And I was going to say, Matt, even with the shades
to
closed,
write about.
you could still find something to write about.
Yeah, you could still find something to write
Yeah.
about. And so, you know, there's an awfully lot of these outlets, other outlets, online outlets, DCs. I mean, everybody writes about the area that we cover, and you just kind of have to take that in stride. You're going to miss stuff that other people are going to do first, and we just try to keep doing what we do best. The huge majority of our contributors, I think we're up to 12 now, have to count sometimes, live in the neighborhood. I've been there quite a while, almost 20 years, so you just get to know a lot of people, and our contributors know a lot of people. And again, there's just so much happening there right now that you're hard-pressed not to find something.
Well, you mentioned that you don't often break news. Have any of you actually broken a news story? And what happened? Did a larger media outlet pick it up? Did you get credit for it? I mean, how do you handle scoops? Who wants to take that one? You want to take it? Have you had a scoop?
I've had probably a couple of scoops, but nothing too crazy. There have been a few points where, I mean, if you're in the neighborhood and out in the street and you honestly see something first and you post it, the goal, I think, as a local blogger would be the person to break the news, so that you're the one kind of getting traffic to your site and getting people excited about. I mean, you being the one that people mention as the first source. But I mean, there have been. I remember there was one time when this is not a positive news story, but a tractor trailer crashed through a facade on a prominent corner of the neighborhood, and I was kind of in the neighborhood at the time and snapped photos of the truck precariously hanging in, and I think probably DCist and a few other folks picked it up and stuff, but I mean, it's usually not too like crazy national news type stuff. So,
Any other scoops?
I will say I think this is an interesting question because to me the idea of the scoop is kind of dead because I could tell you just from we've broken stuff before in the kind of conventional term of it, but I think that today with things like Twitter and the way that sites aggregate content, I think it's really difficult. I mean, for us, for example, one of our biggest things last year was when the Glenn Beck rally was here, and there was a person who, Tea Party blogger in the district, Bruce Majors is his name, and he's still around, actually put up this, or like cross-posted this message about where people should go and not go in the district. And to my knowledge, we were the first place to actually put that up. But, when I saw it on Rachel Maddow and stuff that evening, I mean, there was it had been passed around so many times over Twitter and stuff like that that, who actually broke that news kind of gets lost in the shuffle. So I think the idea is, if you're going to go into something like a local blog and say, I'm just going to get scoops, you're going to be towing a tough path. I think the idea is it's good to get scoops, but you need to also back that up with consistently reporting out that area every single day and doing kind of the yeoman's work that goes into that.
I totally agree with that. I mean, I think Aaron raises a good point about the nature of scoops today, and media in general is so competitive that there's a natural kind of want to be first, and then there's a feeding frenzy off of that. We, as a big network, and I think everyone on this panel benefits from the same thing. You're in place, and your eyes are open, and you're looking. So when things happen, you're going to be there because the bigger outlets simply don't have the manpower to be in those places, and that's the benefit, especially for those local users. There's someone in place to be there when things do happen. For us, it's been interesting. A couple of big examples for us. One most recent was the New Jersey Governor, Chris Christie, deciding to take a state helicopter from Iowa, where he was glad-handing, to his son's baseball game in New Jersey. And our editor out in that area got a tip and sent a photographer and took a picture of him out in the outfield, disembarking and heading over to the game. And we just posted the picture with a few sort of questions about this. And that took off, as you can imagine, when an austerity governor is using state helicopters to do that kind of thing. It raises questions. So it was an interesting moment for us because it wasn't that photo that was the thing, right? That it was the moment that people were look at the governor getting off the big shiny state helicopter in the local baseball game, and that photo ended up everywhere. So we were there. We got the tip and we were able to be there, but it was sort of the feeding frenzy after, that really was interesting.
Well, in addition to knowing how you handle news first, that question was asked because we wanted to know how traditional media views you and whether they would compensate you for news and things like that. So do you want to?
Well, let me finish up on the scoop. Here's where I think it still matters. If you are a small news site and you break a couple of stories that everybody else then, City Paper, for us it would be City Paper and DCist or Washington Post or whoever, and they pick that up and they link to you, they cite from you, and then it goes out. What happens is an awfully lot of people in your readership area who didn't know about you suddenly know about you. And we had 2 cases of that where we got permanent bumps in our site traffic. A lot of times you get bumps on something just because something's in the news or it's a big story, and then it goes back down to where it was. But for us, and when we were just starting out, and we've been around 3 years, and I'm talking 2 years ago and about 3 years ago, that can have a big impact. But following up on what you said, you've got to be consistent. People aren't going to keep coming back to your site if you're a one-trick pony. But I think if you're small and just starting out, those things can really matter.
Well, that's that is very important because that adds to your credibility as well. So let's move into that area for a little bit. And this end of the podium, we consider bloggers to be people that write in first person and write op-eds, opinion writers. Some of you do that, some of you don't. So I'm just going to say online writers, because that encompasses everybody. How do you respond to those who say that you are less legitimate because you don't have an editor, fact checker, et cetera, and that you don't have anyone that makes you be reliable, credible, and have sources?
I mean, that's kind of my job. I don't, you know, I copy edit every single piece that goes on DCist. I fact check every piece. You know, when we're wrong, which, you know, everyone gets one thing wrong occasionally. You know, we correct it. We make editor's notes. We say, listen, we messed this up. I think that's short-sighted, and I think that's a problematic attitude for a lot of places to have, because what that in essence does, I sound very bitter, but I'm not. What that in essence does is it gives them liberty to, you know, use without attribution is what it ends up being. It's like, if you can just say that, oh, these people are bloggers, right? Then we don't really have to cite, you know. So there's definitely, and I think I think a lot of organizations are getting a lot better about it. But I do think that there's kind of an aspect to that it's a little off-putting, that people don't think that a lot of the work that local blogs do, and especially in DC, I know a lot of the people that run local blogs in DC put in just as much work as I put in on you know, cultivating sources and making sure that they get things right. So.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, sure, there are times when I have made mistakes and I do correct them, and there's always either a little note that I put in that I have corrected it, or it'll go into the comments. But, you know, I can't count the number of times that I've seen the Washington Post, the Washington Times, or even the BBC, or, you know, I mean, countless other very respected media outlets make really crazy mistakes when they're reporting stuff in my neighborhood. I mean, and, you know, so yes, I might have typos, and there might be things that I occasionally do wrong, but they do the same thing. So I think, you know, as long as a blogger, you can sort of watch, or just any online media source, you have to sort of look at the history. What is that person's track record? Because yes, anyone can write something crazy, but if you look at that track record, it'll, you know, bear out in the end how trustworthy that person or source is.
Yeah. I just want to jump. I mean, the core of what we're doing is hiring professional journalists. Last year we did a lot of scaling. We went from 30 sites to 775. We were the largest hirer of journalists in the country, which is something we're very proud of. Sean and Brad, both professional journalists with journalism backgrounds. And that's where it starts for us, but not where it ends. And we use a lot of contributors from the community. A couple of years ago, I heard, I think it was Morley Safer, he was at a panel, someone asked him what he thought of citizen journalists. And he said, well, I wouldn't want a citizen surgeon. And, you know, everyone laughed. My question was, okay, you wouldn't want a citizen surgeon unless you were on an island and the hospital up and left and there was nothing left there. Then you might, in a pinch, want a citizen surgeon or a citizen doctor at least. And I think, you know, again, there's a need being filled, and it does come back to credibility. If there isn't anyone else there, the people who are doing it out of passion and realizing there's a need to fill, as long as they're accurate and maintain those principles, that's what you need.
We have 3 copy editors. One of them is one of our writers. The other 2 are simply copy editors. That's what they want to do. And one of them is a senior at George Washington University School of Journalism. They take turns every night. They divvy up the next day's stories before they go up. I sign off on everything. If there's something we're not sure about, it comes out. So, you know, to say that we don't check facts and, you know, to lump everybody together, I mean, I'd say that's pretty irresponsible. Somebody should fact check.
Do you want to respond to this one?
I'm good.
Well, you heard it here first. They're legit. They are legit. I wanted to make sure you got a chance to get that out, because I know I personally have a problem with that one. I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience now. First, I think we have Richard Robinson from streetfight.com who wants to ask our first question.
Before I do, I have sort of a micro question. David, you said you are, if I got this right, you're covering you're blogging about a community in which you no longer live.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So you're that passionate about it that you continue to do it.
I was hoping for an opportunity to comment on that because it is a little weird, I think. I lived in the Anacostia neighborhood for about 3 years and just kind of randomly ended up moving out last summer. It was like a roommate situation and just ended up moving to a different building right across the river. And when I moved out, one of my requirements that I could still see Anacostia from my window of my apartment. But it has gotten definitely more tough, and something else that's complicated it is I've since been elected ANC commissioner for the neighborhood I'm now in. And so I definitely have a responsibility to the neighborhood I'm in now. And so my advocacy roles in Anacostia have definitely changed. But I've decided at this point at least to keep up the blog when I can, just because I think it does fill a niche that's important, and I don't want to see, I mean, the results of my blog have been small in some ways, but I mean, it has inspired a number of people to move to the neighborhood, and I still get emails every week from people who are reading the blog and get interested and want to learn more about the neighborhood and stuff, and I fear that if I stop then, there would be a change in kind of how the neighborhood was changing. So
You can always say you moved to be totally objective about
That's
it.
right.
I was actually, when I moved, I was actually a little bit glad because I was completely
Naked trash
Anacostia
everybody.
burnt out. But yeah, so.
Well, my actual question, thanks, is for all of you. Obviously, you follow your traffic closely, I would imagine, and there are peaks and valleys. Larger organizations have it a little bit easier. They can go after the sexy, high-profile story and get a big hit in traffic. I would imagine at the local level it's a little bit different. So what are your tactics on a daily basis to kind of maintain traffic rather than, is it looking for the hot thing, or is it looking to just maintain interest and engagement?
It's just working my butt off. I think every day. I mean, I wake up in the morning, I go right to work, I roll out of bed, I go right to the computer, and then I'm on all day until I go to sleep, checking Twitter, all day. I'm keeping up. I follow, I think, around 800 people or 750, something like that, and I just following it all day, even through the evening. My girlfriend who's here is going to kill me for saying that. But, yeah, it's just hitting the streets, just being out there and be consistently a presence. I think that's what helps us, because we, like you said, we don't have that kind of resources. I don't have a video crew or a van, or if something's going on in Tacoma or in Hillcrest, I'm going to hop on Capital Bike Share, I guess, to get there. Which is it's not exactly a way for me to get there on time unless I plan in advance. It's just a matter of just being there constantly and having the right people around that you trust, and having good people work for you, and just kind of keeping at it. That's really the way to keep our traffic. That's the way, at least at DCS, that's what we do to keep our traffic constant.
My blog is not a money-making venture at this point. I have had a few ads on there that have gotten me some pocket change, basically. But so traffic, in that sense, for me, isn't as I don't need to constantly be having a big story that's getting traffic that I can kind of show to people who are paying me. But I mean, it's always nice when you do get a piece of interesting news, or you pose an interesting question that people attach to. But yeah, I mean, for me, at least on my kind of very hyper-local level, that hasn't, of course, I love getting more traffic, but it's honestly something that I don't really check that much anymore.
So we should probably stop here and ask everyone, is this a money-making venture for you?
Oh, I wish.
Or do you wish? Okay. In the end, you would like for it to be a money-making venture.
It's
Patch?
a great tax refund.
Okay.
Oh, we are a business. Yes,
Yes.
we're there too.
No, definitely not a money-making venture. I mean, I've had I have one steady advertiser, and I've had offers from other people, but I have not yet put in the effort to do it. It's just more a labor of love.
Yes.
So is the different? I think one other thing that one of your recent articles on your site actually was about how do you choose your content, and I think what's interesting is that the community writers that are not at this point making money or trying to make money are choosing community content that is feel good about their community that other organizations might not write about, whereas the people that are trying to make money sometimes have to choose the sexier headline that will bring people in, and that is something to think about as you continue writing and trying to sell those ads. Anyone else have a question? Oh, come.
Hi, I'm Marie of inshaw.com. Let's see, for the one-person shop people, David and Elise, how do you keep posting, especially Elise, because you've been posting, your blog has been around as long as mine.
Well, not quite. Actually, yours was one of the reasons I started writing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's been around for about 6.5 years. And I mean, there have been times when, you know, I need to take a break, or it does get a little trying. There was a particular bar that, you know, I knew the owners all personally, and they had a dispute, and it fell apart earlier, right around Christmas, actually. And so we had a lot of issues. Some of the comments got quite nasty. That, I didn't check my stats for a very long time, and I just sometimes didn't even want to deal with it. It was very difficult. I actually thought at one point about just sort of like shutting it down temporarily. But no, I mean, I generally like doing it, and it is a lot of fun, and I know that people do tell me all the time that they enjoy reading it. I think it's useful, so if I need to take a break, take a day off, I just do it, but for the most part, you know, you got to keep checking that Google Reader, got to keep talking to people, and I mean, you just do it. You just got to make time.
David, what keeps you?
I mean, honestly, what keeps me going is just the desire to want to keep people updated on what's going on in the community, and make sure that there is an outlet for neighborhood news. Because while there's a local print newspaper that is produced for the general area east of the Anacostia River that has been kind of a traditional news source over there. There hasn't really been an up-to-date source, and there have been a couple blogs that have begun since mine over there, and probably a few before I even started. And so people are starting to be online a little bit more, and so I'm not always the first person to say something, but it's really just kind of the desire to make sure that there is an outlet out there.
Hi, I'm here from Kansas City, and I'm really interested in understanding what the demographics are for each of your sites. What are the age of the people that are really engaged in your site? Are you missing a part of your neighborhood and what you're covering? How would you do outreach to change your demographics?
See, I love talking with people from other cities about this because you know, DC, I always tell people, is the best place to run a blog that I've ever seen, because just the pure number of people that are involved in the local community, that are plugged in, that want to see things get better, that want to see change or keep people accountable. You know, I think there's a huge critical mass in DC whereas you said Kansas City, right? You know, I'm not sure if that happens a lot in other cities, and I'm sure, you know, and Brian can talk more about this in terms of Patch, and what the difference is between the two places. But I think, you know, in terms of our site, we have a fairly wide audience, but it does tend to be, you know, 18 to 45, you know, people that are out of school, people that live rent in the center of Washington, D.C., in kind of the dense areas, and people that are interested in, you know, not younger stuff, but like cultural things that you know, some people in the city aren't as interested in. But I'm sure Brian could probably pick up on this too.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the people in the demographics in our communities vary, obviously, but there are some threads, and, you know, shockingly, a lot of our demographic are people who are very engaged in their community, own a house there, have kids in the school system, and are looking for things to do. and make purchasing decisions. Those are all obviously things that people of that nature are going to be looking to find places where they can be active about the issues that concern them and weigh in on them. So that ends up being, it skews a little bit female for us, not a huge amount, but, and there is, within that greater demographic, which is very broad, honestly, there is a large segment of moms, very active in the community moms who are the ones taking their kids to the soccer practice and to 4 other events, and the ones who are scheduling things. So we're actively experimenting with how to create content for them. I mean, not out of whole cloth, but what are they really interested in? How can we continue to serve them beyond what we're naturally, organically getting just from a news cycle?
So is it very diverse?
Depends on the community. And in fact, that's one of the things that we're actually launching 3 Patch Latino sites. So these are communities out in California where we've identified it's a community that's over, in these cases, well over 80% Spanish speaking. These are experiments for us, but they'll be Spanish language patches. And we thought that was important to see, what we can serve those communities with that might be different elsewhere. But diversity is a big issue as far as, you want to reach the whole spectrum, so you want those voices represented.
I've got to get that mom demo. I got to talk to him about that.
Do we have another one right here?
Hi, my name is Scott Broadbeck. I run a profitable hyperlocal site here in DC called arlnow.com. And I'm a big believer that in order to do good journalism, you have to pay a journalist. And so I think that to do this on a full-time basis, it has to be profitable. And I have a question for Brian. I'm wondering how many of your sites are profitable at this point. I know that a lot of them are just getting underway. Mm-hmm. But one of the concerns is there a business model?
Sure.
On a corporate level? Yeah,
I mean, that's the question du jour, I think, in this business. It's a great, I can't talk about financials, but I mean, we're making a huge investment for the long term. And we look at profitability from 2 levels. One is obviously sort of corporate profitability, but also on an individual town basis as well, for the reasons that you're raising. We do think it's important to start with that full-time journalist. And we're not in this to be a charity or to fade away in a few months. So we've hit every, you create a runway for yourself in the model. You set a lot of goals and milestones that you say you're going to hit. We've hit all the revenue milestones that we said we're going to hit, so it's all trending very well. But everyone on this stage is doing an experiment, Patch included. This is, Clay Shirky was writing about this a couple of years ago, about how this is akin to the Gutenberg Revolution, where there was this chaos in the time of the printing press, and then afterwards it all became clear what the printing press was for. The internet is brand new as far as media is concerned. Twitter is 4 years old. I mean, these things feel like they've been around forever. They really haven't been. Hyperlocal news and the things that are, 6 years, 5 years, whatever. We're all babies, so we're all figuring it out. And anyone who tells you we've got the plan and we know exactly what we're doing, they're lying to you.
Well, other than advertising revenues, I'm noticing that there is something else that's missing from these sites that is in your traditional newspaper or traditional magazine, and that's investigative journalism. Some of you run one-person shops, you just don't feel like you have time, but is that something that you see happening in the future? Are you just a community advocate, a consumer advocate, or are you also an investigator?
Our goal is to produce reporting, original reporting, as well as aggregation, and as well as commentary. We try with our resources to do the best we can to produce quality journalism. And, our senior editor, for example, Martin Ostermuhl, who I'm sure these folks know, has been, doing a lot of digging in terms of the politics and stuff, because that's his, we're lucky enough that that's his expertise. And he's interested in going through Office of Campaign Finance documents and ANC filings and stuff like that. So our goal would be to expand that as much as we could, because that's really what drives a lot of our traffic, is people who come and then they stay and they get the kind of homey vibe that we've created with our community. So they come in and they say, oh, wow, look at this interesting report. And then they stick around and they say, yes, I'd like to look at, cheetah pictures from the zoo and stuff like that. So,
I thought it was panda.
Oh, yeah, pandas too.
That's what the house
Oh,
moms
we're
and
on
soccer
the
moms really want to know.
we hit the zoo beat hard. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So yes, hopefully we will expand that in the future. Yes.
I'd say that it does happen on a local blog level in some ways. I haven't really done a whole lot of it, but a kind of blogger colleague over at Congress Heights on the Rise, which is an adjacent neighborhood to Anacostia, she has spent a lot of her time doing investigative journalism and hoping that bigger media people will pick it up, and a lot of it actually hasn't. But I mean, stories like advisory neighborhood commissions embezzling money or not reporting funds and things like that, and a lot of that type of journalism that that if kind of picked up on and made a big deal about might help change the community. And so I think that some of that stuff does happen just kind of as a natural outcropping of caring about the neighborhood and figuring out what bad is happening and trying to fix it.
You know, and I don't want to monopolize the question time here, but I think this brings up an interesting point in that there are stories in communities that don't necessarily have the widespread appeal that, like Chris Christie getting off a helicopter, that's going to be picked up by every network news station and go out to millions of people, but that are really important that people care about and that they want to know about. But there's a limited kind of number of people. But and those stories are important. But there's a nice little niche there. If you can kind of climb in that and say, well, we're the person that's investigating, hyperlocal politics. I think there's definitely value in that.
I think that's a good point.
One of the things that we have found is a surprise, and our traffic numbers show it, a surprising, and echoes some of the things some of these other panelists have said, there's a surprising interest among what I would call the younger, newer residents of D.C., the people in their 20s and 30s who are driving the population growth in the city. There's a surprising interest among them in advisory neighborhood commissions, ongoing development, and those related issues. And I think sometimes investigative reporting happens by accident. There was a story, the saga of Hank's Oyster Bar, and they're wanting to expand into an adjacent building and have another outdoor patio. And one of our writers, Tom Hay, who by profession is a legal researcher, and he covered that story, God bless him, through numerous meetings and so on and so forth, and he really got into it. Well, it turned out there were some arcane regulations within the ABRA, Alcoholic Beverage Regulatory Agency, rules regarding community associations and how they could have standing. And this kind of came out just because he was just digging. And it turned out that a lot of people either didn't know about this particular rule or they ignored it. And, the reality is there's probably an awfully lot of invalid voluntary agreements around the city. And so sometimes it happens by accident, if you just keep going into something and going into something. And, that's an issue that is probably only of interest in D.C. You're from Kansas City. Stick around and we'll tell you about advisory neighborhood commissions.
We have time for one last question from the audience, I think. Well, we can stay for a little while. You make the decision.
We can take a couple more
take
questions.
A couple more. Okay.
Also, after the event, we're going to have a reception. You can mingle with the panelists, and there will be a cash bar back here. So I'm going to throw it over here.
Okay. I'm sorry. I couldn't see you back there, but we'll get to you. Don't worry.
Yeah.
We're such a community here.
I know. And I'm from New York City, so we don't experience that too much. Just one thing, a comment that man made. We are in the press club where journalists do get paid, so I want to thank you for bringing up that journalists should get paid. So that was my first question. But I'm curious to know how much any of you actually engage your readers. I do have a blog, and it's doing very well. I can see where my traffic comes from, mostly from images that I post, and I post a lot of them. But everyone's always saying to me, well, you're on Facebook, are you doing this, are you doing giveaways, etc. And when you're a one person or maybe a one editor with 3 contributors, how do you handle that? And secondly, what do you think of aggregators? People that just take your content and put it on their site without the link. Because I think there was a ruling last week that was legal.
Yeah, well, we go after the aggregators pretty hard.
Shouldn't be.
I feel like we have an arrangement with our contributors, and even though they're not paid, they publish that information, and so we do people the courtesy of not taking their information without crediting them. So we just ask the same in return. That's all. And I think your other question. I'm sorry. What was the first part of your question?
How often
Engagement. Yeah. Engagement. We do at DCS. We have a very successful photo show every year that's really good called Exposed. And we have various ways of engaging with our readers. Like we have a photo pool that people can submit photos to. We do occasionally, sometimes we used to do more, and I'd like to do more actually in the future. We've done like music concerts and happy hours at local bars and stuff like that. I think that's actually coming back around. We kind of got away from that, and people are doing it a lot more now. So I think that's something that we're looking forward to doing more of.
Just to jump in, one thing we haven't really talked about is Twitter, and
that too.
That for me has been a huge way to add traffic to my blog and just to issues that I wanted to get out there. And I think that that's one way that, you talked about it a little bit, but one way that, news is breaking or that you're sharing content. You give kind of the title of your article or some teaser and a link, and that's how a lot of people, I feel like, get to information these days. I feel like almost if you're not on Twitter, then there's kind of a relevancy that's lost in a lot of ways to especially local news and I'm sure national news as well.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Engagement is a huge thing for us. You can ask any editor in our network. I think the challenges are around time, right? How much time do you have in the day to both report, edit, and engage people and be part of those conversations that are sort of the whole point. When you throw in the social media of Twitter and Facebook and anything else, you could almost have a full-time job just managing your communities on those platforms where the point is not to just regurgitate what you're, using those as broadcast channels. The point is to be selective and start conversations on them, knowing they're there, and then engage in those conversations. And so they're not dumping grounds, they're playgrounds. So that's challenging, I think, for anyone, but certainly when you're more of a one-person shop.
Right. I would definitely say, this is a side project for me. I do have a full-time job, and so I use Twitter. I'm trying to use it more. I use it to get story ideas, but I'm trying to interact with people more. I had set up a Facebook thing at one point, but I don't even use Facebook for myself. I don't really like Facebook, so I have not gotten to play around with that yet. We were actually chatting about that before we got up here. I do use a Flickr pool, and I think that's really useful. People really seem to like to see their photos up on the site, and I've had various people approach me in bars and restaurants and be like, "Are you so-and-so? Thank you so much for putting my photo up there." So that's always fun, and obviously that gives me also a chance to, maybe there was some big event or something and I couldn't attend. That way I can still get the photos and use it, and everybody's happy. I get a lot of emails. I try to interact in the comments, but I also, I try to let people, the commenters sort of police each other to some degree, unless things really get out of hand in the comments. I do answer questions, but often they won't answer the questions, and if somebody is really acting out, I will step in. But I do try to let people kind of control themselves. And with aggregators, I am extremely careful when I quote from someone to give, or even just, when I cite something, I always give attribution, and I am a lawyer. I do think a lot about sort of copyright and stuff, so I am really, really careful about how much I take, and I always take very sparse amounts. And yeah, if someone is taking my stuff, particularly if they're not linking to it or if they're taking, whole paragraphs or something, that's really not appropriate. It's just wrong.
We use all the basic social media, Twitter, Facebook, Flickr pool. The Twitter's a great way. I mean, not only just site traffic, but I think it also it is a great place for story ideas, and I think it also is a good way to sort of build your brand, in the areas that you cover. One of the things that we've been amazed by, I think, really just in the last year, our co-founder and co-editor is a professional photographer, so we use a lot of his photos on the site, and the Flickr pool is great also, for additional photography and so forth. It's amazing how many people running other types of sites, no one up here, and probably, maybe not even anyone you would know, who think that for whatever reason, they can literally go to your site, download the photo, upload it on their site, and not even necessarily attribute you. And this has happened with increasing frequency in the past year. We don't know why, but it has. And I don't know what that's about.
I'm going to throw myself onto the panel for just a second here and answer your question from my end. Now, I run a different type of site. I run a full city lifestyle site, which is more like a luxury lifestyle site, one of the glossy magazines you'd pick up. But when it comes to engagement, not only do I use Facebook and Twitter, but I probably answer 500 to 600 personal emails a day of people that want to know, what's the best dentist in town and where should they take their wife for their anniversary dinner, or, are people still wearing chunky white watches? But I think it's really important, you believe me. I think it's really important, especially since we are saying that we're online writers and we're quick and fast and personal, that we do keep that personal credibility and that personal touch to it. So I answer everything personally. And when it comes to aggregators, I have never chosen to belong to one because I syndicate my content for pay. And I do not think that someone should be able to aggregate my content without paying me. I syndicate it. I am paid for it. So I personally stay away from them. That's my answer. Okay, we're going to go over here.
Hi there. I'm a former local reporter for WAMU-FM, now not doing local news, but still interested in it. And I guess my question is not just to the panel, but curious to know if anyone in the audience coming from a city local versus hyperlocal background would have any comment on why it is that places like WashingtonPost.com, or even for that matter NewYorkTimes.com metro section, wouldn't have by now gone hyperlocal. Because there must be people like me actually, who do appreciate the hyperlocal geography of hyperlocal news, but frankly never got into the whole blogging thing, mostly because of the style issue, that it is maybe more subjective in its writing or its scope or perception than I would like, that it might be maybe not as vetted factually as I would like. So I guess I'm trying to say, why is it, especially maybe from the other gentleman in the audience who has the profitable hyperlocal news site, why don't you have WashingtonPost.com trying to hire your folks or your folks to sort of not aggregate, but just brand under their own presence the geography of hyperlocal news with the quality, with the expectations that, their brand offers?
That sounds like the TBD experiment
Yeah,
to me.
it basically sounds like TBD in a nutshell, yeah.
Well, and they both have. Washington Post with Loudon Extra, right? New York Times with the local, which was different, and was something we came up against. We launched in 3 sites in New Jersey, 3 towns, Maplewood, South Orange, and Millburn. About 2 weeks after we launched, the New York Times launched the local in Maplewood, South Orange, and Millburn, New Jersey. They did it with one person for 3 sites, and they were actually ironically running a blog by a Times reporter rather than a news and information site. So, and they were quite open about, this is an experiment. We have no idea how to support this financially. We're going to give it a go and see what happens. And then they ended up stopped doing it. Now it's more of an experiment with college kids. But they run into the same challenges of how do you. They have 2 businesses when they're trying to do online, right? They have the print and the online. And it's dollars to dimes, is what they say as far as the advertising. So it's very challenging to run those 2 and figure out how to support online hyperlocally what they're trying to do in a more metro region.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that I've, myself and Martin are both members of the Post's kind of, I guess they call it All Opinions Are Local. And so they have a group of bloggers that we occasionally cross-post to the Washington Post website. So there is kind of a very small investment in that. I think, though, to get to the bigger part of your question, I think that there's just this is still kind of a small piece of the pie that we're talking about here. Not to belittle anyone on the panel or myself, but there's still, people want to read the paper. I'm a big believer in print journalism. Like, I'm one of these that's never going to die kind of people, because I like to read it on Saturday morning with my coffee. But it's for somebody out in Fairfax, they're going to read the Washington Post and they want to know what the headlines are and when they're on their way to work during their commute. And I still think that there's a big audience for that. I really do. And that's okay, But not everything has to be super hyper local. And I think it's good to have a separation of the powers, so to speak.
One last question. Okay, we have a couple in the back.
Did I turn on that? Hopefully people can hear me.
Hi, my name is Jessica Durkin. I'm a community manager for Block by Block, which is a group that follows independent new news startups around the country. Now, I've got two questions, and I don't know if you have time to answer both, but one of them is, the first one is for Brian at Patch. Some of the Block by Block publishers have just formed their own campaign against the scalability of news. And these are all independent community news publishers. And their slogan is, local doesn't scale. So my question to you, actually it's to you and to any of the other, anyone else on the board or on the panel that wants to respond to this too, from a local independent standpoint. What do you think about that, local doesn't scale? I'd like to, just to kind of put it out there for debate.
Yeah, no, I think it's true. And what they're saying is, that may sound weird from the company that's trying to scale local, but what I mean by that is we're trying to be local as they are, right? That's why we hire someone who lives and works locally. So I think a lot of the criticism that's been leveled at us along those lines is nervous criticism about, in their minds, a big company coming in to squash the local players, which is not at all what we're trying to do. We're trying to be local in 849 different ways. And I think when you talk about what's the other thing that gets thrown around, sort of authentically local, it's really not for us to say, it's not for them to say, it's for the people of that community to say, right? If they're getting served the information they need, whether that's from a local entity that's supported by a major corporation or an amateur who's just passionate about it, that's all that matters. So people will vote with their feet, and that's kind of the only thing that matters.
Did you have a second question?
Well, I did. This one was it's for each of you if we have time. Where do you see yourselves in a year? Where do you see your sites in 1 year from now? Thank you.
I'll let you start.
I am not sure where my site will be in a year. It'll probably be either doing the same thing or no longer in existence.
Border stand.
Depends on how long my energy holds out.
Patch.
Same energy. No, I mean, I think that's true for everyone here, and certainly our editors. We're still trying to expand and grow the business, so hopefully we're in that many more communities. We'll see.
Yeah, again, it is a side project for me, so it really depends on what I'm doing with work and what else is going on in my life. I would like to make some changes. I would like to maybe add some more advertising, get a little more organized with certain stuff. Restructure a few things. I don't know. I mean, I've thought at times about maybe adding a secondary writer or something, but I don't know. I know that there are different blogs in town that have tried doing that, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Right now, I write all of my own stuff, except I do have one thing that I cross-post with several blogs, and that is just a local arts update. So I don't know. I'm not sure.
I think there's a sea change going on in the way that people get their kind of things that we write about. We just redesigned our website. So we went from a purely reverse chronological format to a kind of, I guess, what they're calling the Gawker format, which, whatever. So, there's a lot more emphasis now on production as well as editorial content and, that kind of thing. So, we'll be spending the next year kind of honing that, and, maybe that'll lead to, more investigative journalism, or hopefully more engagement, stuff like that. But that's, I guess, where I see us in a year developing that more.
Now, the panelists will stay, so if you stay and enjoy the cash bar, you'll have a chance to chat with them, but I do get the last question, and that's because we came here to ask, are you getting it online? Are you actually using online to replace the newspaper and your 5 o'clock broadcast? So I want to know from the panelists, we've already heard from you that you don't think that it's going to replace your Saturday morning paper and coffee, so we'll go down the rest of the way. Is this going to replace your newspaper and news broadcast?
I definitely check my Google Reader every day, and I get a lot of stories from different blogs and sites there, but I also have a copy of the New York Times in my bag. I have a subscription.
So no.
I wouldn't try to crystal ball this at all as far as print versus online. I think online is clearly here to stay. It's the quickest way to get news and information. That's not going anywhere. Print is a different thing, and so I like to read newspapers, but I think online is here to stay.
I'm addicted to online news content, but I still like the feel of a newspaper, particularly in certain situations. If I'm on a metro train, or I'm on a bus, or I'm at the beach.
You're trying to hit the dog
early in the morning.
What about that evening news broadcast? No one's talking about TV here, so.
People watch evening news.
Haven't watched the evening news in 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm just being honest.
That's great.
We have a friend. I have a good friend who's a few years older than me even, and he made a reference to Brian Williams one night, and I had to stop and think who he was. And I'm not trying to be nasty, but I mean, it's so far removed now from my daily news sources.
Okay.
I like to think that I get more information in print, but I really honestly don't. I think it has completely replaced at least like daily print for me. Like I've never subscribed to a newspaper, and I always just get information on Twitter or blogs, or even online newspaper sites and stuff. The one thing I do appreciate print for the most part still is magazines, and I think there's a visual element in that for me. But.
So stick around, get a cocktail, and pick their brains. Thank you for coming.